Peace. Peace,
Yes.
everyone. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Blessed love. Blessed love.
Here we are again, the end of another Shavua. Of course, I am Achi Antonio, and this is my cousin,
Our cruise.
Cruz.
Yeah, man. Blessed love.
Hopefully, your strong has been, progressive and productive, and you've conquered what you needed to conquer. How did your strong go?
So, man, it's a glorious experience, continued preparation and locking the process and really getting prepared for Yom Shishi. As we close off Thursday evening, the steps are very much so calculated on Friday just to make sure we're here present for not just, the Shema readings, but also for the downset of the sun. Especially now in this month of Ramadan, it's been a process also, just preparing ourselves from reverence. We've been pulling a lot from your energy with reference to being conscious of prayer, the prayer cycles. Haven't really locked up hard as much as I would want to as yet, but that's all a part of the reflection.
Yeah, for sure. It's part of the Reformation. And of course, if you're speaking to about calculation of time,
Naturally.
sometimes it's just some things that don't factor in.
Yeah.
So you always got to use that miscellaneous block of time because today has been packed.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so my strong has been going pretty good, and I see everybody trickling in. I just want to take this time to acknowledge that there will be a 20-second delay. So if you make a comment and we don't get to you right away, we're not ignoring you, but not necessarily. But yeah, we got to give it 20 seconds for us to be able to see it. So, shalom, shalom. My name is Precious.
Yes.
And Achi Isaiah. Peace, Achi. Peace, Naya.
Yeah, man.
How are you?
Glory of the day. Happy Yom Shishi.
Yeah, man, for sure.
Yes,
so let's get into it.
All right.
So this strong Shema is going to be continuing in the segment on courtship, which is a subsection of family. And I think Deidre had mentioned how how long we've been in the section, but it's a very comprehensive section and it's very necessary. So this is something that you want to comb through with a fine-tooth comb.
Absolutely.
As it says in the first paragraph, family, the decision to create a family is one of the most important mathematical decisions, second only to what God you choose to serve. So we're going to continue with family, we're going to continue with courtship, and we're going to continue with this concept of making a request.
Absolutely.
Right? So, of course, we're going to open the space with reverence to the Most High Yah and giving thanks to the Honorable Chief Yuya for authoring this text, collecting this information, and setting up the dominoes for us to just knock them down along the way. Give thanks to him for that, for gathering all of this information and tasking us with using it to reform the way that we've been moving through life, which has been kind of, not sane in a way.
Yes.
Yeah, so definitely want to give thanks to that. And we want to go through this process, begin this process with a reading of the preface of the Anu Way Foundations. And the preface states this book is not to be read only once. Read the words of this book of knowledge and wisdom out loud. Discuss the convictions of this work with your Anu brothers and sisters. Share this information with your people. This publication should be read daily. Every line of this book can be taken out of context and studied on the strength of its own potential, and the truth is to be deliberated. This is from Chief Yuya, Hassan Anu. And it always struck me as interesting that not only is this book not to be read only once. Some people flip through a book and they're like, "Oh, I've read that one." You're to read it daily. That's the charge. And each time you read it daily and you read it out loud, you start saying things through recitation that you never really allowed to pass through your mind, let alone come pass through your lips and everything. So it's a very interesting experience, even dealing with that. So our cruise,
Yeah, man. Full joy. Just I won't say piggybacking or even making a step back, but more in this case, more or less a build. With reference, you were talking about the calculation of creating family. You know, you have to look at we should rather look at what the concept of family is to us. So if your first most important mathematical decision is choosing what God you're going to serve, in most cases, if it's a accredited system that's indigenously structured, perhaps Asiatic, in most cases, it will be a system that speaks to family being the manifestation of the will of God. You know, a man and a woman are incomplete from the level of not just procreation, but both the triple thread, which would be omniscience, omnipresence, and omnipotency, without coming together now, creating the legacy and embarking on the divine mission of actually creating family. So, for anybody who would have been following, our Shema readings for the last few months and strongs now, and you're seeing how long we're actually on this. You're looking at knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, man, which is masculine, feminine, and then of course the legacy that is created. So you're looking at continuity, and that there is a process that is binary within itself. Ones and zeros, it continues. Every time you add another zero, another one, it expands. So if we look at our genetic memory and what it is that we have inside of us, we are in a continued perfecting state that we must continually pull from. And the only way to do that is to understand the full geometry, the divine science of it. So it takes due care for us. And if we're in this space, in most cases, there's something that we realize is not balanced and is on a level dysfunctional. So we need to massage these processes into our psyche. As far as reading every day, just moving back into our declarations of truths, when we talk about some of the strengths of our systems that we've been pulling from, this is a collection from an intermediate perspective of those strengths. And in most systems, it's always encouraged that you block reverence every day. You read a scripture every day. You will give an enforcement for yourself in alignment with the Creator every day. So, when you read the Anu Way every day, you're now bringing yourself back into alignment with that divine calculation, shaking it off, or using a chisel, if you may, to move away those superficial tendencies of yourself. So we just want to state that as far as our journey moving forward, this is family, but family is economics. So off of that we'll get into our reading.
Yeah, what you said just now actually reminded me of harmony from the 14 keys.
Yeah.
When we're talking about the ones and the zeros, and Chief had made mention of thinking of every person or every individual as a unit, and all of these units have to basically harmonize with one another if they're going to exist within a group. You know what I mean? And it that sort of ties into what we're about to speak on. So, without any further ado,
Yes. Yeah, man. Well, we're going to pick up the reading at this point. And again, following in the Anu Way, we are on this page starting with the paragraph courtship request. Again, this courtship request, the last paragraph on this page. Courtship request should be presented in writing. This can be done digitally or on paper. The request is given to requester's local Anu authority, and that authority then presents it to the authority presiding over the person being asked for courtship. When a request is put in, the following information should be provided: name of requester, age of the requester, location of the requester, name of person being asked for courtship, name of Jagna of the requester. For those who are not familiar with the term Jagna, that's chief. Name of Jagna of the person being asked for courtship, a brief explanation of how the requester came to know of the requested, length of time the requester has been a member of our nation, the current relationship status of the requester. So that is the reading of the paragraph. And I'll read down the list just one more time. Again, when you're putting in your courtship papers, you gotta have these imprints. These are prerequisites, right? What's your name? What's your age? What's your location? Who it is you're sending the information to? Who you requesting? Right? Who's your chief? Who's the chief of the person you requested from? A brief explanation how you come to know who this person is, the length of time that you've been an anu, and your current relationship status. So, I'll put a layman's term, everyone like to properly take it. I know we scholars and all, so let me break it down to some English Creole for y'all,
Yeah,
man. So,
it starts from it has a well thought out progression, these systems. So it starts from the person, the requester, and then it goes to what that person is, their age, their location, um, and then it goes to the person that they're looking at, and then the person who presides over them, their covering, their jegna, and then it sort of stops from, if I'm, it's like that line, the counter between the person who's coming to the shop and the cashier, and then once you go to the other side of the counter now, you have the name of the jegna. So you start where you left off. So it goes up to your jegna, and then it stops. There's like a gap, and then it's like from that jegna to their jegna, and then it goes back down. You know what I mean? So it's a hierarchy and a very well thought out respect for a hierarchy, and making sure that you're doing this righteously and within the context of the culture.
Naturally. Now, that being said, there's a question that we want to put to you all who are listening with us, and of course, if you're looking at the thread that you sent us down with us now, or wove for us rather, which is the aspect of a well thought out process, that's wisdom. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, wisdom is a direct component of knowledge. So the question is, what are you knowledgeable of? So if mating is matching, do you know yourself well enough to know when you've met your match? Mm-hmm. Right? So again, if mating is matching, do you know yourself well enough to know when you've met your match?
Right. And that definition of mating being matching can, of course, be found in the segments that Chief have done on mating. The magic of mating, selfishness of it all. He did like a series of breakdowns for that month during that year when he was doing monthly segments, the monthly breakdowns. He would start off very light and get into it more and more and more. And that month that he did on mating, it really makes you. It's ironic. It doesn't make you want to go out and look at someone else. It makes you want to really examine yourself more and understand your own shape, because you're matching something. You're matching this thing with that thing. Like the card game match. You go flip over the cards and whatever matches. Yeah, you're matching. But you have to understand what the first thing is. If I flip this card and I get the ace of spades, and then I flip this card and get the deuce, and I try to put them to the side, a passerby would be like, wait, what was that? What did you just do? You can't put an ace with a deuce. You got to put an ace with an ace.
True. And pulling from that, from the idea of what you would refer to with reference to mathematical equations. So if we look at our journey through arithmetic, and we play back our academia, it started with the sequence of numbers first. Before we moved into addition and subtraction, multiplication, division, we moved with 0 to 9. So let's picture that as knowledge. This is knowledge of self. And, supreme mathematics speaks of knowledge, looking, listening, observing, right? So if we look at it from that perspective, we have to go inward now. Before expansion happens, contraction, you have to collapse within yourself. So looking at now what our end result is, if we're navigating to marriage, we're pushing towards that end. One of the key things about the marriage ceremony is the contract. So hence, we start with your request being presented in writing. So again, from a knowledge perspective, do we really have what it takes to submit to a system like that? Most of us, we're navigating. We're over 30 plus years old. Maybe a few of us have children, we own homes. You know, do we really know ourselves well enough to have an objective point of view given to us from somebody? So when we present this request in writing now, it the foundation of it is starting the same way it is actually intended to end. So if you're presenting it in writing and it's going to end with the signing of a contract in the presence of the contract is, it's directly enforced with a witness being present.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just me and you. It's a witness. A witness has to be there. So now who now is mediating this process for you? Now in this case, now it's community.
Right. And you are your chaperone, whether that's your Jagnas or whether it's honoring elders. And I really want to touch on that point a little bit more. Just want to acknowledge a few more people coming into the chat. Peace, Akot Munira, Ima Akuya, and Akot Shamani. Peace. Welcome to you all.
Love and harmony.
Love and harmony.
I know in the house.
Mm-hmm. That's it, love. That's it,
man.
love. That's it, love.
Yeah,
But for sure, you have to start a process in the way that you intend to end it. You don't want to start it the way it usually is started in the West, where rather than approaching your elders first to ensure that this is a very objective experience, you want to sneak off as much as you can. And, I think we had referenced this before. I had referenced this before in previous segments when you're talking about programming.
Yeah.
The television shows and the movies that we watched growing up, they sort of shaped this idea of Romeo and Juliet being the ideal format for a relationship, even though it didn't end too well for those two. But those are the archetypes that we normally form after, forget what our parents say. We're going to sneak behind our parents' back, find an enclosed space, and do what it do. As Aki Zak would say, get busy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it speaks to a certain imperative too, with reference to how the masculine and feminine energies are encouraged to actually interoperate with each other. So we look at Romeo, and it's expressed that in Western culture, or I'll say Babylonian, Roman-minded systems of thought. It would be that the only thing you have to do to your feminine counterpart or your prospective consort is to romance her, as opposed to being objective with her.
Mm-hmm.
So Ever Precious, when she was with her Sister Deidre was speaking, was speaking about the letter. Do you like me, check X? They were speaking of the science of it. We were much closer to our divine instinctive self back then, and our objectivity, I think, was a little different too. So now here it is. When a woman would submit a letter to a man, I'll keep it from that. Let's shift it. It's always us guys say, "What's up? Let me give you a flower." But if a woman submits a level of courtship papers to somebody, or not a level, but she submits courtship papers to someone, you look at this requesting process now, like, hey, I would like to go into courtship with you. I'd like to match with you. This brother guy, okay, so now, do I know myself well enough now for this process?
Yeah.
And this moves into now also it being in writing, ain't no verbal.
Yeah, but the thing about that is, and I'll let you deal with it. It's your part of the paragraph.
Yeah.
She's not giving it to the brother. You know what I mean? She's not even giving it to the brother's Jagna.
Yes.
The same would go for the brother. He wouldn't give it to the sister. He wouldn't give it to the sister's Jagna. He would give it to his Jagna. And before he even gets to the other side of that shop counter, he has to pass his Jagna's scrutiny. His Jagna might be like, "What do you mean you're ready to court?
Yeah.
You don't have this in place. You don't have that in place. you haven't um, you haven't really dealt with what has been hurting you. I can't have you going out there creating more of what you've got inside of you. You know, the same could be said of the system.
Actually, and we touched on this in a couple of strongs ago
Mm-hmm.
when the Jagna presses you with some questions.
Yeah, and
You know,
they make you think.
he presses you with some questions, and this puts me in mind of chief segment, the right to speak. Um, Short segment, very 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 powerful, and you look. One of our Anu brothers has a saying that I've certainly held it as a mantra since he introduced me to the philosophy. How you do one thing is how you do all things, right? So if in a spiritual system you can stand up because you're known, for instance, or you have followers, if you think that that actually qualifies you immediately and accredits you from the information that you're speaking, you know, you definitely have to check yourself, conceptually on that. So in the right to speak, the idea is if you get up and you start speaking in the presence of people who are elders and they've gone through various rites of passage, they're right and exact in their words, it is expected that you're speaking on behalf of the house that you represent. And one of the things that Chief drew an illustration to very briefly was, like, for instance, a martial arts dojo. So you see these various tournaments. For those of you who would have been in the science or maybe just skim past it, there's always reference to the coach. There's always reference to the sensei. So when you falter on a form, there's always reference to, hey, that coach must be very disappointed in that person because that person is now representing in speech and technique and form what it is that the house represents. So if your Jagna now presents another Jagna or the Jagna of your prospective mate, courtship papers, and you are just trash, you are just raggedy, that Jagna now has to be questioned. Like, hold up, what's going on here?
Right.
This brother been under you for a year and a half, 18 months building. You said that he's growing.
Mm-hmm.
You said that he's putting things in place. You know, this brother doesn't even have a 5-year plan. This is reverting back to some of the questions now that we would want to get to the core of. Okay, what's your 5-year plan? What's your 15-year plan? What's your plan for your family? Have you thought about these things? Like, what are your intentions for not just this person's life who you got to bring into family, or you got to bring into your fold, but yours. So there's a level of self color that you must understand. Hence, you're looking to match. So if you don't know what you are, if you don't know what is your color, you don't know what type of portrait you're going to create. And that's something that weighs with me very heavy in this process. You think you're talking about mathematics now. If one of the first things in algebra is you have to firstly move out of the brackets. You have to define what x and y is or whatever characters they're using. It typically is x and y, which is another science, right? So if we are comfortable in stating that we are moving in a life changing system, there are certain tetherings that we must have. Think about all those movies. A lot of people haven't really experienced it. Think about all of those movies where you go into, like, for instance, always like an Indian village or some indigenous tribe village, and you have all of these elder men sitting around this fire and they're discussing rules of engagement on a harvest or whatever it is that they're talking about. There's always levels of eldership present. So even if the person who may be perhaps narrating it or seeing it from their eyes view may be an adult, there are people above them who they must answer to, and it's because people have gone down the path already. It's a reason for understanding objectivity, and again, it's objectivity. Your elder can also be somebody who may be a brother. For your sisters, you know you would entrust that your brother understands you. Um, he may see some things about you that maybe you can't get over your own way with, or some things that you perhaps need. And he's seen some of your falterings. So when these courtship papers are now presented to him as your annual authority, your chief, you should want to know that you can trust your brother. In this case, now let's say if it's your blood brother, you know, somebody who's understanding how you are developing, maybe some of your shortcomings and shortfalls, maybe some days that you're a little more emotional about, you know, maybe this brother who's looking to coming to the zone with you is maybe a little too soft spoken. You know, you need a little more power because you possibly haven't gotten quite there yet. This new covering that you're going to be coming under the guise of, you know, is now going to take you to the next level. He's going to help you to define your self shape. You know, so that I think this part, though, is just the beginning. I think this part is strongly overlooked as far as the chaperoning and how the vetting of the courtship request is. You know, what that dialogue looks like between Jagnas. You know,
and when it comes to executing a plan, you got the tactics and you got the strategy. So your strategy would be, I want a family. I want to create a righteous family. But the tactics is your approach. What are the steps that you're taking to create this family? And is each step respecting and reflecting upon your original goal? You know what I mean? And I think I misspoke earlier when I said that the scrutiny of your jagna makes you think. And what I should have said, a better word that I could have used, is it makes you reflect. It makes you reflect on what it is that you have been up to this point, what you are now, and if that aligns with your vision that you have, received from the Creator of what your highest self could be. Your most divine self, even the highest manifestation of the Creator, coming through you.
True.
So if you're going to reflect that, then your vision has to push you towards that, and your mate's vision has to push them towards the same thing. So can you actually be beneficial to each other in the pursuit of that vision, or are you going to be a hindrance towards each other because your approach is off, your angle is off, your purpose for trying to mate with this person is off? Yeah, they're righteous and they're spitting a good game, but I also like the way they look. I also like the way they sound, or they might have a certain skill or talent that I've always admired. They may have certain assets that I want to have access to. Are you mating because of earthly and / satanic reasons, or are you mating for divine reasons to say, I want to create more of what this person is, and I want to amplify it and refine it, and continue that reformation process throughout generations? It's something that you shouldn't enter into lightly, because it is a very, very long process that spans generations, and you have to play the long game with it. You can't just say, okay, I did all the steps you told me to do, so what's next? Really understand why these steps are in place. And just like we were speaking about with the preface, if you're reading these words out loud every day and you're allowing them to pass through your lips, really scrutinize yourself and see what's your visceral response to each word. You might read something that's utterly repulsive to the way that you've seen the world thus far. Let's pause, take a deep breath, and dig into why that makes you respond the way that you do. And you can, of course, always reflect on these things with your jagna, and that'll inform your jagna of how prepared you are to make. Because if you go to your jagna, they start hitting you with these hard questions, and you've never really taking the time to do that self-examination or self-exploration, then you're going to feel like these questions are coming out of left field. But these were always things that you should have been focused on, instead of superficial things to make yourself seem like you're growing, or seem like you're a man, or seem like you're a woman. It's not about seeming; it's about being.
Yeah, that even when you think about the question, right? And we'll recite the question again for you. And that is, there we go. That's which side you in, right? if mating is matching, do you know yourself enough to know when you've met your match? So again, look at it from the steps. So the first step is choosing your God. What I'm saying is, when choosing your God comes why, how, when, where, how do you do it? How do we navigate that plane? So the reason why I'm mentioning that is because your self shape should now be reflective in that. Your purpose is now revealing more of itself to you. It's on your journey to aligning with your purpose and your divine self and your divine nature and your alignment with your creator that actually helps you to determine what your full shape is, and as a man what you need, and as a woman what it is that you give, what it is that you have to offer. Because you would, as a man, say, hey, I need to sit by the ocean and bring fish to my community. And really and truthfully, what you've been drawn to the ocean for this whole time is the fact that you need to get into transport. But it's when you start to actually pull yourself closer to what your Almighty is requiring of you. And that purpose is when you're going to actually bring yourself into a full embodiment of what that concept is. As a woman, you might say, hey, I weave, I make nets. I'm just speaking something very basic. We're on an island, so you know, you might say it's weaving, but really, as you start to bring yourself into your divine nature as a sister or woman, sorry, you may realize it's actually cultivation. It's that thing that allows people to be in the presence of their creativeness to actually start weaving. You see? So now here it is, you have your component, which is cargo, to bring to this brother's shipment. So people who have a need for what it is that you produce or what it is that he needs you to produce, you're being prepared for that. So it's these questions that you ask yourself. Obviously not about weaving or production on farmland, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what I am referring to is pressing yourself as to what's your rhyme and reason. What does your creator have in store for you? And in that process, you start to actually identify purpose, and you start to discuss purpose with your new potential mate, with your prospective consort, because now there's a structure as to why. Okay, what do I need to bring into this space for it to be a balance? Because he must see you as aid. He must see you as nourishment and management for his homestead. We started to discuss this, which would have been the segment after the brothers as a collective when we spoke, and this was the week after Aki Vermont was making reference to understanding what the true and divine matching is and why. And him and Brother Lowe were actually having a strong build on that particular topic. So it's these questions, and you think about colors, and this more moves down your dynamic with reference to how colors match.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what spectrum are you, or not what spectrum, sorry, what color ray of the spectrum it is that you're actually manifesting? And if you think about, what it takes to make blue,
Right.
And those colors are,
Well, that's a primary color.
sorry,
So you're not making blue.
yeah, okay, sorry, I said it the wrong way.
But you could use another example like green.
Okay.
You need blue and yellow.
Okay, that there's where I was going to navigate, right? I love the green, right?
Yeah.
So if your desire is to create green because that's what your purpose says, now are you going to look for a woman who's red, knowing that you're blue? You could only get a certain type of woman, or if it's a sister's, mindset. You also have to be very open about what it is. You might be straight black. You may not be any of those things. You may be something that's not even a color. You know, that something hasn't brought enlightenment to you yet. That bachelor principle of omnipresence hasn't woken up in you yet. And that's where your jegna comes in. That's where your community comes in to assist you in finding, the areas of your strength. It's conditioning for one to fight. For one to know how to fight, one must fight.
Yeah. And it's funny that you brought up colors. One of my old jobs was working at a paint shop, and while I was there, I was trained how to match colors. So someone had a house that was painted 5 years ago, and they say, I want this color again. I I can't do it. I can't give you the same color that you got 5 years ago because the color faded.
Mm.
Over time it got worn down, it got jaded. Um, it might even seem a little powdery because it started to decompose. So now my job is to give you the same color again, or roughly the same color. So now I have to say, okay, give me a sample roughly the size of a quarter, and we would have this machine. It's called I'm not gonna find the name of the machine.
The machine.
Yeah, the machine. Let's call it the paint matcher. So, so as long as you give me a sample of paint that's at least this size, I can put the paint matcher on it that has a small lens, and it'll read it, and it'll give me the closest color to what you have, right? So after Hurricane Dorian, I didn't have the machine. We lost the machine, but everybody still wanted their paint match because their house was either damaged or destroyed, and they want to get their life, back to normal. You know, every time disaster strikes, so we get back to normal.
Mm.
Which you're never going to go back to normal. You're going to find a new sense of stability.
Mm.
But matching that paint, I have to look at this sample now, this old, dusty, worn-out sample, and I have to see what colors made it, and it's not an easy thing to do. You know what I mean? So you have to compare it to other colors in the book. Get the big fan deck of colors. You got to compare it to each of them one by one, manually.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, I'm getting warmer, I'm getting warmer, I'm getting warmer. And it sort of speaks to what you were talking about with purpose. You start off with Chief would always say a wise person only needs a hint. So you would start off with the hint, okay, I want to go by the water and fish. Even though you're supposed to be dealing with transport or any type of maritime industry, all you have is that hint. Like, I could look at this thing and be like, okay, this definitely looks green.
Naturally.
But what kind of green is in it? What else is mixing with the green? Is it yellow, a little bit of brown in there, a little bit of orange, a little bit of blue? You got to take your time and sift through and eliminate all of the possible candidates of what it could be, and basically say, okay, it's not this, it's not that, it's not that. And it speaks to that negation process.
Naturally.
You know what I mean? So you're looking at this thing and saying, or you're sitting at the river and you're fishing, and you've got to have someone or an elder that's objective that can watch your progress and say, okay, you're getting warmer, but I'm not going to tell you how warm you are because you might stop searching, or you might, pat yourself in the back a little bit too quickly and, get jaded. So I can't really praise you as much as I'd like to because you need to keep pushing. You're not close enough. But you're getting warmer. Keep searching. Keep searching. Keep searching. And that's what that self-exploration helps you to do. Why am I triggered by this? Why does this make me do that? And you never know. While you're doing the search, courtship request comes in and you're like, I'm not ready to court. Now you can go to your Jegna, who you've built rapport with, who's actually been watching your progress. Am I ready to court? Nah. You ain't ready to court. So you might have to turn down a request. Not every request means you have to say, yeah.
Naturally.
Yeah, I'll court.
Yeah.
Even if you may be open to the idea of courtship, you would be doing so much detective work on yourself that you'd be like, okay, not yet. You know what I mean? I'm not ready yet. I'm not fully aware of my own shape. So if I do try to match with someone else, especially someone else who's not aware of their own shape, then it could cause confusion. So that's why this is just the first step. Subsequent steps helps to get you closer and closer to what it is that you are. But if you're not careful and you jump the gun, you could wind up creating like Chief would call the Frankenstein family.
Yeah, what I found as you were speaking, it was just opening up like a lotus. What I found very interesting is you used the term destroy. When you made reference to like the hurricane time. during the rebuilding process.
Right.
You know, and then I think about what you mentioned this, and I start to think about the seasons, right? So let's say if your color is brown, that's your brand. Your purpose is brown. But in fall, you may be moving with a spring brown. You know, your browns may be off. You haven't really balanced yourself. So hence you need to be observed more. And the thing is, your first ministry is ministry to self, and you know, I'll pull some energy. Shout out to all our new family who've gone through our new spiritual training. We know is first ministry is ministry to self. Second is ministry to the Creator. Third is ministry to the community. So you have to go through that process of rebuilding your emotions. You know, understanding what your color is. You know, are you fall oak tree leaves? You know, are you that shade of brown? Which is there's no oak down here, so you may be in the north, in the northern regions, whereas you know there's a certain brown that palm trees give, which is a little more tethered to this region. You know, are you that right now? You know, but your shape should be that oak. You don't really see it until someone could witness it properly to see what your power is until they've actually been in your direct cipher for a full set of seasons to see and observe you, and also to you know the observation process comes in with looking at what your cipher is. So cipher is a circle. You have multiple angles that intersect at certain points when you actually move around that circle. So you have 45 degrees, you have 90 degrees. How do you look at 45 degrees? How do you look at 32 degrees? You know, why do you need to be scrutinized more at 32 degrees? Maybe that timeline going between fall and winter is a difficult season for you because you have all sorts of memories. Maybe because a parent passed away, or maybe you maybe own a business or have an intense profession that has their fiscal year turning over at that time, and maybe you just shut down. You're an emotional wreck around that time because you're working 16-hour days because that's how you set your life up. You know, how are you going to operate now when you bring infants into your space? You know, these are all things that your community will assist you with. You know, your elder sits with you. These, remember now, these are your brothers and your sisters. You know, they know how you navigate. You know, they know you like honey in your tea instead of agave. But the sister is maybe allergic to beeswax. You know what I mean? She don't know that about honey. You know, so these are things that you know you do well to structure yourself on with reference to identifying who you really are. Nobody's really answered or taken a stab at the question yet. But school, we riding with it.
Yeah, I have another question. Of course, I want to reference to the chat though. We have two more people come in. Peace, Akot Deidre. Peace, L. Williams. Shabbat Shalom. But when you were speaking, it made me think of what Chief had spoken on in the segment that we did on, you know, the personal Goliath, you know, the recent segment. And he spoke about personal rites of passage, right? So you have to deal with, you know, your man's training and your woman's training as a part of the courtship process to make sure you've gone through your rites of passage. But he had also spoken about personal rites of passage, which are kind of quiet. You know what I mean? And what I wanted to ask was, what would you say was a personal rites of passage that you had experienced? Or maybe even you've encountered someone, you know, you've witnessed someone go through a personal rites of passage where you're like, okay, this person, they got a chance to test their metal in a way that it's never been tested before. You know, they got to see what they're made of, essentially. You know, because their character was tested in a way that they may not have been prepared for. So it was a very visceral response, but it was like instinct intersecting with their own personal code, and having to deal with a situation that may have been unreasonable.
True. You know, and like the way you touched on that just now, actually, what I really wanted to get into is, you know, when you look at what should be provided the information, the first thing is your name. You know, the name speaks so strongly. You know, I know we start to study on the linguistics, and your personal rite of passage a lot of times is identifying a name. You know, you were given something when you traveled down the birth canal here, which is a name that, there we have a sister who chose her own name when she was an infant. Very beautiful process that she made reference to. You know, we don't think about these things as far as how we are identified in our community, in our social circles, um, how it is that we like to be identified or what we want to be identified as or with. And a lot of times it isn't really shaping up with, what our ideals are. So now you start to see a sequence now. Ideal, identify, right? So what do people know you as? And if the foundation relationship is based on discipline and respect, what is the person actually looking at? What is your brand? Do they see a progressive person, a person who's actually reaching for that crown, reaching for that chain of Ubatana, and pulling themselves out of the deluge? Can your Jegna actually speak to that? And this brings us into we started to speak of the evolutions from the solutions work that Chief did. Um, we see that the brother was asked, well, what is your plan? And he had to actually be able to dialogue with the elder and his wife in reference to how he foresees this process. And even with all the beauty of the plan, there's also a level of resolve that must be present. Hence, the elder's wife asks him, well, okay, what are you doing to ensure that this doesn't become just a machine? That isn't just one of your other pieces of work, one of your other projects. This is actually a living organism that's it's coming together to evolve. You know, your purpose is on this life plane, pulling all of the energy that your ancestors would have come with and downloaded into prior to coming here. And now morphing that to actually move within your purpose, pulling the strengths, putting aside all of the defaults, everything that's self-destructive and so on. You're now going through that renouncement, which is something that we were talking about a couple of weeks ago. And yes, and us as brothers now, speaking from that perspective, she is also doing the same thing. So now when you come together now, remember as we discussed a couple of strongs ago, one of the questions that should be present is, what is our union going to do for our community? What is the benefit of it? You know, individually, our presence here, socially, community wise, nationally, should be a benefit to the community that we are part of. And we learned that also in the annual way. There, we should be giving something healthy to our surrounding space. That should be even more amplified when we're talking about the matching. Again, our self shape. So are we going to put an oak tree where there's a residential community, knowing that it's going to tear up the foundations 30 years from now? Knowing that we're going to make abomination of children. Do we think about those things? Or are we going to plant coconuts that can help us to withstand? Man. So we have to think about where it is that we are or why we're there. Hence, when we sit, we pull energy from each other. We have that exchange. That within itself is a rite of passage. As a man, when I sit down and I speak with my brother sends me down a path of reflection. He presses me. Okay, bro, you've been on this for a while. Have you really gone through the self-study needed to take this to the next level? Let's start there first. Do you really have what it takes to actually be mature enough to manage a homestead? Or are you still caught up on daddy issues or mommy issues? Some basic things that we need to cover that in most cases we neglect. Hence, what's your name? You know,
Start there.
what are you known for? When your ancestors set that shrine up for you in the ancestral realm, what's on it? What is on it? Do you have all of the elements? Are you moving into the ether? Yeah, man.
And we have some responses in the chat, and it's kind of interesting actually. So Maxine says, I'm getting to know myself more every day. At this point, I do know myself well enough to know my match. I also welcome eldership and women and eldership and wisdom, for counsel though. All right, so Maxine, you're gonna put a description of your match and how that relates to your purpose in the chat. for everybody else in the class.
Come up to the front of the class.
Yeah, man. And
Show
then
us the work.
Ima Precious says, while I am definitely learning myself more each day, I trust Yah and our new elders to assist me in recognizing my divine mate. So Ima Precious says, yeah, it's kind of the same answer. It's similar. The difference is Maxine says she knows herself well enough to know her match. And Precious says she is trusting Yah and our new elders to assist her in recognizing her divine mate. Maxine, it must be a wave. That's a tough question. Truth is truth.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, but do you know it when you see it? That's the question. You know,
Does your tree limb float on the stream that you're by? Do you know what it is to be around multiple bodies of water? Have you developed enough diversity in your space? Um, and I'm using that analogy from a natural perspective. We haven't explored our nature in a lot of cases enough, and I'm not speaking to any of you sisters directly now. I'm speaking about from a generalized perspective. In a lot of cases, we haven't explored our self nature to the point that we know what it is that we need. We know the things that really are bitter to our stomach when we pull from our biblical law. Um, the things that are sweet to the mouth but bitter to the stomach. We take a lot of things in, not realizing how they've imprinted themselves in us.
yeah, even down to the food that we eat.
Down to the food. And this goes into not an evolutions passage of the solutions. I'll recommend to anybody who hasn't read it yet to really go into the solutions. It's a very profound piece of work, and it speaks to the sister who actually stepped down on her name, her brand, because she now is lonely. She made a choice as opposed to showing that she was in this divine principle of nature and evolving and looking to reach for this crown. She sat down and actually lied, in essence, to this brother. And it wasn't until she became pregnant that she had to actually, pretty much seek counsel from his ex-wife with reference to, okay, this is what it is. Matter of fact, even let's pull it from another angle. In that cipher, she didn't even think to ask why it was that his first marriage didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
She speculated on it, but she didn't think to ask those questions.
She actually blinded her, because the thing about it, to lie to the man that she was basically dating, she had to lie to herself first. So it always starts with self. And she turned a blind eye to so many details and so many aspects because there was an agenda at play. And it was a very earthly and um, very misconstrued idea of age. She thought, I haven't had a child at this age. I need to hurry up before my eggs dry up. It's like, you still haven't qualified yourself to have a child. You haven't gone through those rites of passage yet because you're willing to manipulate someone throughout the course of how many years are they dating?
Enough.
Yeah, enough. Over the course of that whole time, you knew that all you wanted from this dude was a baby.
Yeah.
And you didn't stop to really try and go through the discovery process to try and even if she didn't read the other way, she still could have on some level said, this is something that's very important to me. And before I allow you into my internal space, I should be righteous enough to be straight up with you about what I am. And that takes a level of maturity and adulthood that you get through your rites of passage. You get that through being challenged or going through those personal rites of passage. So some of my personal rites of passage were pretty simple, but they were scales. It was like the same thing, but at different levels and different scales. And some of my life lessons where I got injuries were like on the same scale, and I had to keep learning throughout life. You know, you can't. That's not for you. That's not for you. And I have literal scars to prove it. Um, I'd mentioned this before, but I think most of, if not all of my scars on the left side of my body. You know, one on my foot, one on my knee, I think, one on my left finger, one above my left eye, one on my head over there. And each time I got that scar that needed stitches, it was because I was being willfully disobedient. Every time. So this one here I got like when I was 5 years old, jumping in the bed. My mother was on the phone. You know you can't stand still when you're on the phone.
Yeah.
So she was walking around saying, "Stop jumping on the bed." So I would stop. And she'd be in the room and start jumping on the bed again. So apologies, I caught DJ. I didn't give the warning that this is story time. But as soon as she walked out, started jumping on the bed again, you know, and she walked in again, and she was like, "I told you to stop jumping on the bed," but she was so enraptured in her conversation on the phone, she didn't like remove me from the space. So of course, sat. Maybe then she walked out of the room, like, listen, okay, her voice is getting kind of far away. Started jumping on the bed again, and I thought I heard her voice, like her volume increase. I was like, "Oh, she's getting closer." So I tried to stop, but I tried to stop like mid jump. So I put my foot down and I jumped kind of awkwardly and landed right on my head. And then the edge of the bed frame was like that, like
Waiting
yeah, it's just
to
waiting for me.
break the skin.
Yeah, this thing mirrored, so I'm trying to get the dynamics.
Yeah.
And where they controls. But yeah, it was just waiting for me. So cracked my I didn't crack anything. I just broke the skin. Because I was pretty young. So I broke the skin up there, got my first set of stitches. Down there fought every doctor in the hospital trying to put anesthesia on me. And my mother had to bribe me with a Power Ranger action figure.
Not even a GI Joe.
Not even a GI Joe.
Power Ranger, right?
She promised me a blue one too. All I had was red. Red
True,
was common.
True.
I never got the Power Ranger. But I didn't deserve it either because I was being willfully disobedient. Same thing with this one. First time I tried to open a coconut, was not supposed to touch the cutlass. You know what I mean? So those were my rites of passage that happened in a very negative way because I refused to listen to instruction. I refused to, listen to my elders. And each time I learned over and over again, okay, disobedience and abject rebellion is not for you. You know what I mean?
For me, my rite of passage, if you didn't notice, I like to actually express myself earlier. I like to talk, right? Is realizing I didn't have the right to speak in many areas. Realizing that I put the cart before the horse. And the rite of passage, it's amplified when you actually now have to take a step back and you have to go to someone who's further along the path and you say, "Hey, listen, man, I kid you not. I remember when I did this and I did that. And I have not been able to move out of that emotional strain yet." Hence, I'll use the example from Brother Antonio with reference to the scar. If our cells regenerate, and this is something from when he was 5, then why is the scar still above the eye? Why does it always move on the weaker side that needs the most support? So now we start moving into the metaphysics of ourselves, but we won't turn this into a metaphysical conversation. But certainly, again, Ramadan, reflection, it's a reason, and it's funny, I had a conversation with somebody very dear to me this morning, and we were talking about Yahweh Shai, when he was on his Ramadan period in the 40 days and 40 nights of fast in the wilderness. Of course, that's a very symbolic time in the scripture, where he was approached by the spirit of the air and said to him, "Hey, what's up?" You know what I mean?
Nothing.
Yeah, that's up his reasoning. But he knew himself shape enough to actually be able to speak to where he is, and why he doesn't have to go someplace else.
And what he is.
Naturally. And a lot of us have not gone through that emotional healing to reflect as to why it is that we're still intimidated to speak with people about what we really feel on the inside, um, with reference to our loneliness, um, with reference to maybe our self doubt, you know, to ask somebody to be your elder. Hey, help me, assist me with this. You know, an accountability partner people like to refer to as. A lot of people don't like the word elder. You know, that's your business. You need to have an elder. You know, self initiation is good. Putting yourself in self rites and passages is good, but you don't really have anything to measure it by. You know, you can punch on that bag all you want, but until a brother who has been in that ring comes and tells you, "Hey man, you need to fix your feet," maybe another 20 degrees over. You know, you never really unleash your full strength and power. You know, until an older sister who you respect as a mother sits with you and gives you that nod of disapproval because maybe you fell down on something that you broke your word with, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe you did something that's um, you knew was going to harm another sister, and you tried to pretend like you didn't intentionally do it.
Yeah.
You know, you start showing very conniving and catty traits that she has to sort of shut down. And okay, so we have a response from Naya and Sister Shamanique. I'm still waiting on that, you know, that description of what your match is.
She's like, no,
Yeah.
I don't know the word. Can you put it? Can you put in a sentence for me, please? Can you put the question in the format?
Yeah. Naya says, great story. Reminds me of my daughter explaining these things of her and her siblings. I never understood.
Yes.
Greetings. Oh, greetings. Please accord Kashia.
Yeah.
Naya, I'm not sure. Maybe my story.
Yeah, I think that's what she's referring to, the kids, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, man. But, you know, full joy, sorry. You don't say but. Nevertheless, we are counting down to sunset for those of us who are observing Ramadan. I know this is an exciting time for a lot of you. Because you're able to eat, you know.
Stop banging on the table.
You know, this bear, you got to do the, you know, but you know, the Sabbath is starting, so you definitely want to respect everyone's time. There's some provisions that some of you, especially the sisters, are possibly making for yourselves to make sure that you don't have to be laden down preparing food tomorrow. Those of you who have youth, also getting them situated and set. Those of you who have mates, so certainly we want to respect your time. But we definitely thank you for sharing the space with us. For those of you who are going to meet us 20 years down the road in the YouTube world, you know, come and tune in, you know.
Hold up. My match, this is from Sister Shamanique, Maxine. My match would have qualities of an Anu man, given that I am maintaining. Oh, that's so generic. My match would have qualities of an Anu man, given that I am maintaining qualities of an Anu woman. Which, you know, this closing time, so
It's quitting time.
yeah, it's quitting time. So we'll take that.
Well timed,
Yeah,
sister. Yeah.
but that is pretty general. I'll take it for now, but we're gonna work on that.
Hey, but the truth is, you know, the anaconda is pretty big when it's slithering on the ground. We can see it, you know, we can see it. It wasn't, it wasn't like we didn't see you, you know, just put it out there right at the tail end, you know what I mean? So good vibes. So yeah, but definitely understood what you're saying to us.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly, you know, we will have some more dialogue on it. But I definitely want you all to think about what the self shape is. Um, you're right, again, for those who've done the Animal Spiritual Training, you're right to move in this world and have divine wealth. Divine wealth is not physical riches that I'm referring to, you know, to amass wealth. And wealth is economy, you know, And economy is the movement of resources through the homestead, and the most divine resource that can ever be present is the heart and mind of the man and the woman, and the pouring and the legacy created by them, with either the birth of children or the creation of something else, or all of the above.
Right, and definitely cultivating yourself,
Yeah,
um, with your digners, with your elders, so that when it's time for you to actually express what it is that you say that you want to do, you actually have the right to speak.
actually,
You have the right to speak because you've worked with and been, scrutinized and built up by someone who's actually righteously leading you on the path. That they're a little further along, than you are.
actually, find an elder man, find a family, you know, find a mate,
Yeah,
find a mate, man. It's not good for man to be alone.
right.
Elohim said it. He ain't say it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not good, and that by extension is the woman. It's not good for you to be walking around uncovered. You know, what is your divine purpose? There's a part of it that you won't get until the king comes into the space.
yeah.
Planets revolve around the sun. Aki Isaiah touched on that in our study session. So we tend to say these things and think, or can come across as bigots, but we have to find that self nature, man. We have to find what tree it is that we like to sit under, and what fruits sustain us through the day. And only then can we actually make a determination on how our homesteads will actually function. Do we need a fan or do we need AC? You know what I mean? So off of that, have a cruise, Aki Antonio. We look forward to the day that all of us will be together, sharing time on the Sabbath in the Bahamas, or where some of you are by the Great Lakes and otherwise.
Oh, we have one more. Oh, bevakasyon. Akot Shamani. And DJ Sully says, to our brothers, I know when I have met my match because of his ability to read my mind, because I will have given it to him completely. Beautiful. And bevakasyon. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Peace and strength to you all.
Our
Yeah, and get some rest. Peace.